Hi there, I'm John Sepulveda. I'm one of the producers here at The Future of What, and this week I'm filling in for Portia Sabin. We got a really killer episode from Washington, D.C. We were just there for the Future of Music Policy Summit, where we heard from some of the smartest people in the industry. Over the next few weeks, we'll be rolling out different conversations from and inspired by the conference. We wanted to give you a flavor of some of the discussions that happened there, including this one you're about to hear, featuring Portia and Merrill Garbus of Tune Yards. This is the keynote address that opened the Future of Music Coalition Conference. Here's Portia Sabin and Merrill Garbus.
Hi, Merrill.
Hi, Portia.
How are you doing?
I'm great. Good to be here. Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out on Monday morning, you guys. This is great turnout for, where are we again? I feel super jet lagged. I don't know why. Shouldn't. Anyway, so let me just quickly tell everybody, my name's Portia. I have a radio show called The Future of What, which is all about the music business. It's also a podcast, which you can get on Bandcamp. And we're very excited to talk to Merrill today because Merrill is, of course, as everyone knows, a fantastic artist. But the point of my radio show is basically to educate people about the music business, what we all in this room, many of us in this room, actually do on a day-to-day basis so that we can keep a culture alive so that a fabulous artist like Merrill Garbus can continue making music and doesn't have to flip burgers instead. That's the plan.
Thank you.
We'll hope for that. So let's get started by just tell everybody, how did you get into playing music in the first place?
That's a good question. And I guess I also want to say I feel totally floored by the New Orleans conversation that just happened. And I guess it feels very strange because it was 10 years ago that I started touring on my own with Tune Yards. So, and I remember in those first months, I was in Toronto, and that's where I was when I heard the news of Katrina. So it's interesting to parallel my music career with just what's happened to our world over the past 10 years and what's happened to our country over the past 10 years. But also to feel honored and, what's the word? I feel almost speechless that I get to sit up here as a musician and speak as a musician and be part of a tradition of musicians and traveling musicians. My parents are both musicians. My mom is a piano teacher, taught me for 7 years until I was a teenager and couldn't stand it anymore. And my parents met playing old-timey music in the 60s and 70s revival of American folk music. My mom is from Kentucky and came out of a tradition of Appalachian folk music. So it's deep in me. But I went to school for theater and I studied performance and studied experimental, strange physical theater, and after 4 years as a puppeteer, discovered that what I liked about puppeteering most was writing songs about things. So I shifted my focus in 2005 and quit my flipping burgers, which was really, somehow making a living as a puppeteer. I switched that to, I'm serious, 2004, I made all of my income as a puppeteer. Can you believe that? So I switched that and started playing ukulele at open mics and writing songs, and then discovered a friend of mine was like, if you're gonna stand up in front of people and play the ukulele, I might recommend that you use this thing called a looping pedal, which might help you, make this a little bit more interesting for yourself. So I started looping, and that became looping with drums and trying to create a world of sound on my own as a solo performer.
And that was, for me, when I first saw you in the basement of a venue in Portland in 2009, it must have been, because it was Marriage Records had just put out your first record on vinyl. And I was in the worst mood that night. I really didn't want to go out. I was like, I had a big fight with my husband, and I was like, and I remember standing, and then I was like, oh great, it's in a basement too. So then I was in a basement.
And there were about, as far as I can recall, like 10 people.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was.
Oh yeah.
It was rough.
Including me. It was 10 people. Yeah, it was fantastic. And you.
And me.
Yeah, and I was just so annoyed. And you got on stage and you start, unpacking this ukulele and stuff, and I was like,
another chick with a ukulele.
Yeah. And then you started to play, and I just remember it was one of those things where I forgot everything I was feeling because I was just blown away. I was like, what am I witnessing? This is unbelievable. Cool. Especially when you opened your mouth. That was really quite an experience. And I feel like that is the power and the excitement of music when you see somebody doing something that you have never seen before. It's just brand new. And that was, because not tons of people were using looping at that point. After you, a whole bunch of people. I saw tons of people doing it. Eventually, I'd see somebody pull out their loop and I'd be like, why did I come out tonight?
Another chick with a looping
Another chick with a looping pedal. Right. But I feel that you started it. Or we're early on that. But yeah, so it was really, that's such a joy to see somebody do something completely different.
Well, thanks. I'm glad I brightened your mood that night.
You really helped my life a lot. It was good. But I kind of wanted to talk more about that for you as an artist, because you were doing something completely different. Do you feel like you have been able to sort of realize your own vision over the last 3 albums that you've put out?
Yeah, yes. And I guess, I think there's a certain framing that I want to avoid. I think, because what happened to me was I got in my little Chevy, which I'm still driving. It now has about 280,000 miles on it. I got in my little Chevy and I started touring from Montreal, where I was living at the time, around the country. And those first 5 years or 4 or 5 years before there was a record label involved at all was this really glorious time of, I'm kind of interested to hear this, over these next 2 days, what gets talked about. There's an underground scene of musicians who are putting on their own shows in basements, in houses, in DIY venues that tend to get shut down after a few months in operation. When I started touring, it was the age of MySpace. So I had my little MySpace icon, remember those? With my little picture and tune yards spelled with the annoying capitalization because it looked cool, and I thought maybe more people would notice it if it looked weird. And I had this network of musicians. I could say, okay, I want to go to Detroit. We're going to route this tour. It goes Montreal, Toronto, Detroit. So I would, search for Detroit, and I'd look at MySpace, and I'd look at bands who were performing, which venues they were performing at, which bands they were affiliated with. And there's this whole network of bands who would say, oh yeah, your music's pretty cool. Why don't you come and join this show? Where such and such band is playing, and we know that we'll bring 50 people to the club at least, so we can, we'll pass around the hat, and you'll get something. And we did that. I did that with my other band, and then I did that solo for about 4 years, and it's like the university of DIY touring, just learning how to do that and learning how to make that financially work. Then I guess what I want to say about narrative is that there's this. My story is very much a success story of that. I think that then, a small record label put out the album, then the larger label 4AD Beggars Group saw me and decided to put out that same album. I signed a record contract for more albums, and generally, although there are of course ups and downs, my career has been in what direction? That way. Which way are you looking? It's all grown from there, But and now I find myself in this different position where I suddenly am looking from a different perspective of the music industry, and I think what I got out of the New Orleans conversation is like, there's an invisible world that is often not part of these conversations that we're having about industry, about technology, about policy, and we need to always keep our eye on that world. We need to always remember that world is not being spoken of. That there are these things that we're glossing over, worlds that we're glossing over, and I think a community rot, a rot that happens in communities, particularly when things like this happen, where entire communities are shoved out of the place that they've been for so long. So I was just on a tour with my beloved fiance, who is also in Tune Yards, but he's starting his solo project. So there we were playing crappy bars in Lexington, Kentucky, and playing for 3 people, and it was really good to remember that this, again, it's still going on. There's a hum of music scene that's going on in every town and every city across this country and around the world, where people, are in this dialogue of where they sit within the music industry. I think there's a lot of, how do I get signed to a record label? How do I get, how do I get a booking agent? How do I get exposure? But then there are people just making music all the time in their communities because they have to, because they love playing music. So did that answer your question? I have no idea what we're talking about now.
It's fine. You went in a good direction.
Okay.
I appreciate that. And that's kind of the point of this radio show, too, is one of the things we're trying to do is we love to be a resource for musicians at all levels, people who are sort of just starting out, and because we can forget that, although in my job it's hard to forget that because I get so many demos, and I'm always like, really, people? Really? You still want to be a musician even in this day and age, when maybe it's not the easiest thing. I mean,
Always.
It was never the easiest thing, but now it's you often are not going to get paid anything at all in a lot of situations.
But I think that's been true all along for a good number of musicians, and I see that dialogue of I'm not sure. I'm actually excited to learn over the next couple of days. Is that a myth? Is it a myth that it's harder than it used to be? Because it's always been hard, at least for a good number of musicians, as far as I can tell. So the industry again has these conversations about millions and billions of dollars. But I wonder what who are the musicians who just are like well, keep on chugging along the way that we always have because a good chunk of musicians never have access to that stuff up there. So again, I put it to you, and I'm curious because I really want to know. I mean, now, and I hope we can talk about this, but now there's, now I have a bit more exposure, plenty more power actually as a musician. And what really revolutionized my world was revolutions per minute, was RPM, who took me to New Orleans, and I think 5 years ago that was, learning how to, once you have exposure as an artist, then channel that into bringing exposure to other things that aren't getting exposure, and in fact raising money for those things. So that's been a wonderful, I think being a musician and being completely self-centered about how do I make more money, or how do I get more people to listen to me? After a while, that's boring, I mean, what was thrilling about music when I first started playing music was the community of musicians, was connecting with other people, was connecting with the labels. I mean, Kill Rock Stars is a revolutionary label, and connecting with opening for Tao, opening for Shoo Shoo, these bands that I had worshipped, from my lowly status as puppeteer. All of a sudden being in conversation with those people, and being treated as a peer, that was what was thrilling. People whose ideas were revolutionary, whose musical ideas were really thrilling to me. So when you get, now this past time we were touring, we toured on a tour bus, and it's like I'm there at night in this little death cocoon, riding on this bus, thinking, what is this for now? Because we have the audiences, and we have, it's for, it's because I get to get on stage every night and play music and do this for my living. But it's disconnected from each of those communities that we end up parking our bus in every night, what's the use? And why am I performing, in Atlanta if I have no idea what's happening in Atlanta, and if I'm disconnected from most of the people in Atlanta, and if our tickets have priced out most of the people in Atlanta who might be interested in coming to our shows. So I think, wow, again, what was the question? I'm really.
But I think that's a great point. But I would also want to counter it by saying that that is totally true, and that's an aspect of this that you have to think of as a musician at your level. But also, having achieved whatever this upward was, you're now more visible to some little girl somewhere who otherwise would never have known that she could maybe make a sound like that.
Totally. Totally, and that is very important.
Yeah.
Totally, and yes, there have been little girls who come up just like, who is this? What is this thing? Yeah, and that absolutely has been crucial to me.
Yeah, because that's a huge part of this, and I feel like as soon as you gain a platform in music, it's got to be good, because you're showing that there's a possibility for people who didn't know that was possible. I mean, I used to think that. I remember when I was managing the Gossip, and we were in our first arena show in England, opening for Scissor Sisters, and Beth Ditto looked out in the crowd and she said, "I don't think half of these people have ever heard the Ramones." And I was like, "You're right, they probably haven't, but after tonight they will have heard you." And that's the first step, that's something really different. So I think it does make a difference.
I think it's also a challenge to, it's a challenge I always try to give myself, but a challenge to musicians who have that platform, because I think a lot of us get so consumed with, again, the drive, how do I make it, that becomes the whole game, instead of why did I play music to begin with? What was exciting to me to play, about playing music to begin with? I think we were having a conversation yesterday about licensing, which has always been a really tricky thing for me. When I think I saw, is it true that there was a Led Zeppelin song in a car commercial? Did that happen? Okay. So I remember, yeah, it's a wonderful group of people who knows the answer to that question. I remember, there have been plenty of times where, or the Bob Dylan Chrysler fiasco, or whatever it is, but that there's a new conversation where I think now it's versus when I started, on, let's say 10 years ago, it was much more of an issue for a musician to, whether or not they would put their music in an ad. That was like, oh, that band really sold out. They put they're making money this way. And this music that you're so attached to with so many ideas and so many emotions and so much, allowing the individual to stay connected to a song, is suddenly just another thing for sale in our society. Now I think the conversation has turned, and has turned for me too, because suddenly, as record sales in a specific way are dwindling, there's a need for another type of income, and that for us has become advertisements. Now I filter out, I would say, hundreds of thousands of dollars a record cycle of things I say no to, because I don't want my music attached to that product. Alcohol, cigarettes, soda, cars, oil industry stuff is all stuff that I won't put, I won't attach my music to. But there are certain things that, feel either, benign or at a certain point I go, shoot, we got to make money somehow. I would like to continue being a musician, So I think there's always for me this, what are people, how am I a leader? How am I a personality that I want people to not just personality, but the music itself. What am I saying in music, and what am I saying with my music, and what do I want people to to really put their trust in, and how am I, potentially, if I'm giving young people hope that there is a world without oil dependency, then putting my music in a car commercial is going to completely undermine that, for instance. But how do I balance that with how I'm asked now to make a living, which is also, guzzling gasoline on a tour bus for months out of the year. So I think, all to say, these are the challenges that I feel now I have the privilege to face, and kind of, the privilege to really engage. I want to engage with my fans around this stuff, and there's been a lot of blowback that we've gotten. I'm really disappointed that you put your music in that ad, and I want to converse with my fans. Okay, why, and how can we make this better, and how can I do this better?
That's really interesting. I didn't know that anyone had a problem with selling out anymore. I thought that just disappeared. It's been so shockingly, the change was so fast, and I was like, my record label is like the what do you call it, the stalwart of never selling out. It's like exactly. I had just tons of bands on my label that wouldn't do anything, except for Deerhoof, who famously said they would never do an ad for anything except fruit, and then Lauren found them an ad for fruit juice that paid like $80,000 or something. It was ridiculous. It was so awesome.
And are your bands still like that? Are most of your bands refusing?
No, everything changed. Yeah. I feel like it was Of Montreal in that Outback Steakhouse ad, and boom. It's like, now everyone will do anything. That nobody cares anymore.
The floodgates open.
Except for Hummer. Hummer still is the pariah of the, no one will do a Hummer ad, but other than that.
Everyone has their lines.
Exactly. But speaking of, issues, do you want to talk about the water fountain a little bit? Do you want to talk about your
Sure.
charity?
So one thing that we've been able to do that's been one of those things on the tour bus that makes me feel connected is that we secretly add on $1 to every one of our tickets that we sell. We don't tell people that, but that's what's happening. And then we take that $1 and we put it in a fund, and that becomes a fund that we can. We raised a lot of money through that fund, and then we disperse that to different charitable organizations, nonprofits that we believe are doing great stuff. So on this last album, we wrote a song called Water Fountain, and it was a lot about. I live in Oakland, California, and California is in the middle of a really big drought, and Oakland is also in the midst of a huge transition. I would say in danger of losing a core of its community to gentrification, and also deteriorating in its own ways, or at least when I was writing that song. So and I just also gone to Haiti to spend a lot of time studying drumming there, and learned a lot about the economy of Haiti as it pertained to the economy of my country, of the United States. So that song was grappling with all these things, and it became the song that a lot of companies were asking, for. It was the hit song of the album, and ironically was talking about, a lot of anti-capitalist stuff. So it was like, Starbucks really wants your water fountain song for its new summer line of iced drinks, and I was like, that doesn't leave this room, by the way. That was a theoretical example. So I remember sitting in the record label office, I was like almost crying, because they were like, like, you could win for you, blah, blah, thousands of dollars. You've written this great song, and now you deserve to just, like bathe in cash or whatever. And I kept saying no. I just said, no, this doesn't feel right. We used it for a couple of animated things, art, other pieces of art that feels, like a better way to use music for me. And then we got offered a big ad from Sonos to have our music be part of the Sonos sound system ad campaign. And they presented us this really great ad, and it was these cool-looking rainbow Lego-looking building blocks filling a room. And Sonos is a great supporter of musicians and how to that music is the essence of why they are in existence as a company. So we did a bunch of research, and RPM, as our what would you call it? RPM basically powers our nonprofit, this little, it's not a nonprofit, but our little charitable fund. So we had them suss out, and I kept saying, no, it doesn't feel right to put this song in an ad. But finally I said, if you give us X amount, we're going to start a water charity with this. And they agreed. So we were able to take that big chunk of money and stick it in this fund, and now have dispersed that to several organizations that are doing work specifically with water, including water, drought issues for communities in Central California, the Gulf Restoration Network in New Orleans, and Partners in Health in Haiti, and we still have more to give. So to me, this really is also this really cool link between art and activism that I always wanted to be part of Tune Yards. That when I built the music project, it always felt like this is music that wants to have a greater lens. It wants to look outward, out into the world. It doesn't want to be its own thing that is just about popularity and just about getting people to like my music. It wants to refract stuff that's happening around the world, and this has been for me something that's so selfishly satisfying, to be able to every time I play a show, instead of saying like, oh, there are 500 people I have to play in front of, it's like, okay, $500 we made for the water fountain fund, and that is I don't know, it really connects me with, again, my spiritual connection to music, my greater intention with music, and wanting to connect to people in that way. And certainly has also introduced me to a lot of people who are doing water activism around the world, which is great.
Well, I think that's amazing. Can we give her a round of applause, please? That's super impressive.
Oh,
I'm glad you're doing that. That's really nice.
thank you.
Thank you. Not everybody uses their platform in a good way. So that's nice to hear that some people are doing that. So what you got coming up next?
I have to do something else?
Yes, you have to do
Isn't that
more
enough?
right now.
No, writing more music, and also producing. I want to start I've been producing other people's music, and I don't know a lot of women producers out there. I mean, there are tons of women producers out there, but very few of them have the kind of, I don't know, the exposure that, the Skrillex exposure, should we call it that? I want to see more women in the industry in all places, but particularly, as a woman touring, most of the people that you meet on the road, that I find myself surrounded with on the road, have been men, and which is great. I love spending time with men, and I also want to see more women, at the soundboard, doing lights, tour managing, and every sector of the business. So what currently I'm interested in doing is pairing women MCs with women producers, beat producers. So I'm going to try to start a podcast of sorts that will start this conversation. The other great thing about touring is that we've toured now all over Europe, Turkey, Asia, South America, and this, all of a sudden these communities that before used to be like, okay, this weird indie rock community in Detroit and in Bloomington, Illinois, and those used to be my communities, and now the community has really grown into women MCs coming out of Istanbul and stuff, and so I feel like that's a really privileged position to be in, where I can kind of draw lines and connect different people in the industry. So So that's my next thing. Before we do a new Tune Yards thing, I definitely, I just want to now be there. I have enough resources myself to be of support to women in the industry in that way. So, so that's what I'm hoping to do, and learn Ableton Live. That's what I want to do.
Merrill Garbus, thank you so much for
Thanks,
coming on The
Portia.
Future of What.
That was Merrill Garbus of Tune Yards talking to Portia Sabin. I'm John Sepulveda. I'm filling in for Portia this week. We're going to have much, much more from the Future of Music Policy Conference. Stay with us.
Tape for posterity.
Ruining the tape.
Life in the city makes me more sense for Jesus calls. Bang, bang, boy, never moved to. Bang, bang, boy, never moved to my hood, 'cause danger is calling out the word. Bang, bang, boy, never moved to my hood, 'cause danger is calling out the. Bang, bang, boy, my hood, 'cause danger is calling out the word. Bang, bang, boy, my hood, 'cause danger is calling out the.
That was Tune Yards with the song Gangsta. This is The Future of What, a show about the music industry. I'm John Sepulveda, in this week for Portia Sabin. She's catching up at things back at Kill Rock Stars HQ after being in Washington, D.C. for a week. She went out for the Future of Music Policy Summit, and one of the most interesting conversations took place away from the main stage, back in the green room. That's where Portia spoke with Tim Quirk. Now, you might recognize Tim's name. He's the guy who fronted one of our favorite bands, Too Much Joy. And he explains how he went from fronting that band to ending up as an executive at Google. Here's that conversation.
So today we're going to do a feature that we often do called How Did I Get Into Music? And we've interviewed so many really cool and interesting people about how they just got even into this crazy music business to begin with. So Tim Quirk, tell us your story.
Everything in my life has been an accident. And most of them have been happy accidents. So the way my adventure started drunk on a swing set at my old elementary school when I was in high school with a guy, Sandy Smallins, who eventually became the bass player in the band we formed, Too Much Joy. The town we were growing up in, Scarsdale, had this history of bands, like high school bands would play the high school dances, and it was all rich kids with synthesizers just absolutely mauling Led Zeppelin and other classic rock songs. And we were getting drunk one night. We're like, these high school dances suck. It'd be so much better if someone would play some Clash. And then we sort of had this aha moment. We're like, actually, those songs don't sound that hard to learn. Maybe we could learn to play Clash songs. So he started learning how to play the bass. I started learning how to play guitar, specifically to play Clash cover songs at high school dances.
Wow.
And the flaw in our plan was we'd neglected to take into account the fact that we were the only people in our town who knew who the Clash were. So as we were playing these Clash songs, eventually nobody knew what the hell it was. So we decided if we were going to get booed, we should get booed for playing our own songs. So we started writing our own music. And eventually, over the course of many years, we're just recording demo after demo after demo. We finally compiled them into our self-released 1987 LP, which was called Green Eggs and Crack. That got assigned to an indie label in San Francisco. We put out a record for them. That got picked up and re-released by Warner Brothers. And then I was a major label touring and recording artist for the next 10 years.
And I love that story because I was a huge Too Much Joy fan.
Aww.
And when I first met Tim, it was like my one starstruck moment where I was actually acted like a total idiot, and I have never done that with anyone else.
Really?
And I just ran up to you. I was like, oh my God,
I don't
Tim
recall you
Quirk.
ever acting like an idiot.
Well, thank you, because I remember it. I felt like a moron, but it was very exciting. And since I met you, I have actually just not run up to anyone else because I was so mortified. I was like, I will never do that again. So you're the one and only.
Oh, well,
Tim
thank
Quirk,
you.
you're my one and only.
Well, hopefully I wasn't too much of a jerk in response.
No, you were very sweet.
Okay.
It was. I think I was catching you on a good day. I know that it could be annoying when someone comes up to you and says, "I love your work," but 90% of the time it's probably nice.
Yeah, I never tried to be a jerk never intentionally was a jerk in response to that, but my compatriots and I did not have the best reputation as nice people. We're always nice to fans, but we could be jerks to other people in the industry. We did not realize at the time how small a business it was.
Right.
And we had a really bad habit of burning bridges before we'd actually crossed them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, tell us, what were the big differences? And I mean, granted, it was the late 80s, early 90s, so it's a very different business. But what did you find the biggest differences between being on an independent label and then being on a major?
Wow, I could go on for a long time about that, so let me try to narrow it down. What was most surprising to me was the things I expected to be different that weren't. Generally speaking, the people at the major label had all gotten into it for the same reasons as the people at the independent labels. It tends to be music fans who want to be involved in the music business somehow. Either they're musicians themselves or they're not, but music is their life. So that was the same and was nice and gratifying. And there wasn't ever a moment when some cigar-chomping businessman came up to us and said, you got to compromise your morals here. This is the moment you sell out. This is what you do. What it really was this long series of gradual compromises that all felt like little things at the time, but you add them up after like a decade and you look back, you're like, oh my God, that was atrocious. It was this slow conglomeration of stuff toward the end of our tenure on a major label. We were in the studio and we'd gotten the habit of A-Bing whatever we'd just recorded with some hit on the radio to see like how we would sound next to it. I was like, this is not how. And I remember sitting in the studio at one point and looking at ourselves and going, this is not how or why we started making music in the first place. How did we wind up here? And what we found was it's a thing in my experience anyway, that sort of selling out or compromising is a thing you do to yourself. It's not a thing that's imposed on you. But the one example I have of that it sounds mundane, but it was actually, it should have been my first red flag. The way you wind up sort of making decisions that you regret later on, it's usually And I remember I was doing some freelance journalism, and I was interviewing Smashing Pumpkins, and they shared a very similar story. It's like these minor compromises where you theoretically have total creative control. And what happens when the label disagrees with a creative decision you're making, they don't say you can't do that. They just say, well, if you do that, it's going to be 3 more months before the record can come out. And it's little things like that. So we had the record we'd made for Alias, our second album, there was a bonus hidden mystery track, and it had no title. So we get signed to Giant Warner Brothers, and they're re-releasing that indie record, and we get this letter, a fax back when faxes were a thing, from the lawyers at the label saying, well, you have to title this track. I'm like, it has no title. It's a hidden bonus mystery track. They say, well, corporate policy is you must have a title on the song. And we're like, well, but it doesn't have a title. So we go back and forth for a little while. And they're like, well, you could keep hashing this out, but you're going to miss your release date. We're like, okay, we'll give it a title. So being the immature jerks that we were, we sent them like a 3-page title that was basically bonus hidden mystery track that had no title when we were a cool band on an indie label, but now we sold out and signed to a major label, and the lawyers are telling us we have to give it a title, so that's it. And then they come back like the next day and they go, that won't fit on the cassette packaging, you need another title. And so we're going back and forth like this, and we're trying to stick to our guns and maintain our principles. But there's this thread of you're going to miss your release date. And we had this whole, we were recording the next album, and we really wanted to get to that because we knew it was so much better than anything we'd done before. And we didn't really want to delay and have to continue touring on this record that, we were artistically done with. So eventually we're getting drunk and stoned in the control room, and we look at each other, we're like, oh, what the hell? Clash's bonus hidden mystery track was called Train in Vain, and they didn't title it on their record, so what the hell? We'll just call it Train in Vain. That's the title. Just 3 words, it'll fit on the cassette packaging, everybody wins. And a hilarious addendum to that story is many years later I get my publishing statement, and because the Clash never titled their song Train in Vain, we started getting the royalties for all their airplay for Train in Vain.
And it all comes around full circle, see, and you really were a Clash cover band. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So,
That's
but generally speaking, the people were nice, I would say. But in my experience, the folks who, more so these days than those days, but generally speaking, the folks who wound up with major label gigs rather than indie label gigs tended to be the ones who were more willing to make those compromises. And I assume it was a similar process for them, where there's this slow agglomeration over time, where 10 or 15 years later they don't recognize who they used to be.
Right. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
So then when you were done with that band, what did you do next?
Well, the band never officially broke up. Everybody got married and had kids, and my wife, who I met, she was working at Alias Records, the indie label in San Francisco that had put out our second record, but the band was based in New York, so we fell in love. She moved to New York to be with me, and for 8 years, we kept talking about moving back to San Francisco. And I kept saying, this time next year, either the band will have broken up, or it will have broken through. And either way, we'll be able to live wherever we want. And after 8 years, I realized neither of those two things were ever going to happen. And for once in my life, I should sort of put the family ahead of the band. And it's like, if we want to move to San Francisco, we'll move to San Francisco. And the band, whatever happens to the band will happen to the band. So my wife and I moved to California. And we just started touring less and recording less, but never officially broke up. But eventually, it was time to get a straight job. And I sort of eased my way into music journalism, and I was doing that. And the plan was for me to be the house husband, because I'd never had a real job. And my wife was who had been in, she'd worked at labels, and then when we were in New York, she was working in A&R administration at Sony. She was going to go back to work when our daughter started kindergarten. And for a variety of reasons, in 1999, when my daughter was starting kindergarten, the dot-com boom was happening, and I had this weekly column at the time. I was always looking for subjects to write about. I got a press release from Girly Action, remember them? Mm-hmm. And this smart music tech company, Listen.com, had hired Girly Action to do their press, who reached out to people like me. I went to the website, and I remember calling Donna, my wife, into the office and saying, look at this. This is the first .com I've seen that makes sense. These guys are going to be bazillionaires. This is a great concept. It was before Napster. They were basically trying to be the Yahoo. It was before Google even. God, I'm so old. They were trying to be the Yahoo of music, of MP3s on the internet, a centralized location where you could go in, type in a search term, and find MP3s by that band, because they were all scattered back at that time. There was no Rhapsodies or Spotifys or anything. And my wife, being very smart, I'm showing her this website. I'm all proud of it. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do my next column on these guys. And she goes, what's that? And she clicks at, she points at this word that says jobs, jobs, jobs. And she goes, click on that. So I clicked on it. And there was this page that said basically Do you know everything there is to know about a particular genre of music? Can you write? Are you funny? Do you want health insurance and stock options? Apply here. And Donna goes, click on that. Yes. So I clicked on that, and I basically got called in for a job interview, which meant I had to type up a resume. I typed up the first resume of my life, went on the first job interview of my life. Mind you, I'm 35 now, right? At the time in 1999 when I'm telling this story. And I got hired on the spot, and they basically told me I was overqualified for the position. So I joined Listen.com as their sole R&B reviewer, and my job was to just write blurbs, like 30 blurbs a day, about random soul R&B bands on the internet who were putting up MP3s. Wow. And that turned into this, now 15 coming on 16-year adventure in the online music world, where we eventually built and launched Rhapsody, the first on-demand music subscription service, got acquired by Real Networks. Before too long, I was an executive at a publicly traded company, and then eventually left Real and Rhapsody and went to Google and helped build Google Play, and then spent 4 years there and learned a lot about other types of digital content distribution, and spent 4 years trying to figure out why mobile gaming distributors are making money hand over fist when the music business keeps contracting, and eventually came up with an idea that I was like, I think I know how to help the music business make as much money as mobile gaming is, and raised a seed round and left Google and started my own company called Freeform.
We're going to stop the conversation right there, because if you want to hear about Freeform, there's only one way to do it. Become a subscriber to our podcast at Bandcamp. You can go to thefutureofwhat.bandcamp.com. And if you're already online, you might as well like our Facebook at facebook.com/thefutureofwhat. And we're on Twitter at KRSFOW. Meanwhile, let's listen to a little bit of Too Much Joy. Here's a bit from their song, Long-Haired Guys from England.
All the girls in the music biz have credit cards, they subscribe to Biz, and they only want long-haired guys from England. From England. There's this girl in my record company, I dig her, but she doesn't like me.
I'm John Sepulveda in this week for Portia Sabin, and we're going to end today with some music. This is Sheikh Amale Jabate. He's a musician from Mali, and he's known as the griot of Washington, D.C., and he played ahead of NPR Music's listening party. It's what closed out the Future of Music conference this past October in Washington, D.C. Jabate plays the ngani, a stringed lute with animal skins. Here's Jabate.
Boylan Lonila,
Robu Golden Lonila,
Bobby and Pierre Lonila,
Bob and Pia Lonila,
Robu Golden Lonila,
Robu Golden Lonila,
Sunny Jolie Lonila,
Sonny Jolie Lonila,
Shekamala Javade Lonila,
Shekamala Jabate Lonila,
Galici Jolie Lonila,
Galis Jando Lonila,
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 Kwebugana Lonila,
Kwebugana Lonila,
Jessica Lonila,
Jessica Lonila.
On y va, Galice.
Ok. On te voit au populaire et l'arceau. À l'instar de l'instar, dès qu'on sort le métro. Crash, je me place en place avec l'as. Parce que la casse, la masse, ce sont de cette passe. Piné des recherches, c'est piné au PD.
That was Shekamala Jabate performing during the wrap-up party at the Future of Music Conference in Washington, D.C. It was sponsored by NPR Music. And that's it for this week. Music we heard came from Tune Yards, Shekamali Jabate. And of course, our theme song is Mind Your Own Business by the mighty Delta 5. All the music you heard was used with the permission of the artists. The Future of What is produced by myself, Will Watts, and Anna McLean. Special thanks to Beta Petrol and Brent Asbury. Portia Sabin is the executive producer and host of The Future of What. She'll be back next week with a special show from the Portland CMJ Showcase. And hey, you can subscribe to our Bandcamp. Do it right now. Go to thefutureofwhat.bandcamp.com and support a show that supports music. I'm John Sepulveda. Have a great week.